They cover some issues related to so-called two-year bills, but as they apply in the Appropriations Committee. So the approach to dealing with bills in the California Legislature has been to distinguish bills held in their respective appropriations committees in the California State Senate and California State Assembly as either what I'll call a permanent hold, where the bill's really dead, or a two-year bill. Now, just to acquaint you to the notion of a two-year bill, like many legislatures that have a two-year legislative session, in the California Constitution, Article 4, Section 10C, it says any bill introduced during the first year of the biennium, i.e., the two-year session, of the legislative session that has not been passed by the House of Origin by January 31st of the second calendar year of the biennium may no longer be acted on by the House. This means that bills, read not resolutions or constitutional amendments, that were introduced in the first year, the odd numbered year of the session, can be considered in the second year, but only if that bill passes its House of Origin by January 31st of the second year, meaning, of course, Assembly bills out of the Assembly and Senate bills out of the Senate by January 31st. Now, some of observers believe that bills held on the suspense files of the Assembly and Senate Appropriations Committees during the first year of session are dead for the entire two-year session. Now, of course, subject to the provisions of Joint Rule 54C, a legislator can reintroduce that bill in the second year of session and are often encouraged to do so by the fiscal committees. However, the two fiscal committees, again, which we call the appropriations committees in the Assembly and Senate of the California Legislature, they've been making a distinction between those bills that are held and therefore are really considered dead and so-called two-year bills, meaning that they'll get a second review and a vote in January of the second year. Now, this leads to the following issue for those who are following the committee actions. There are differences between how the Assembly and the Senate Appropriations Committees publicly report two-year bills and how these types of bills are set forth in the legislative data system, which is called LegInfo. What do we mean? So an example of the status in LegInfo of an Assembly bill on the Senate Appropriations suspense file that remains eligible to move in 2024, so it's a two-year bill, might say in committee held under submission, which would imply that it's done for the year. Now, we know that this particular bill I've cited is in fact a two-year bill based upon the list that the Senate Appropriations Committee has posted online. In the other house, an example of the status in the LegInfo website of a Senate bill on the Assembly Appropriations Committee suspense file in the same sort of situation might say September 1 hearing postponed by committee. So how does the reader determine whether a bill is a true held in committee, i.e. it's dead, or it is a two-year bill? So I've come up with a couple of notions in talking with the committee staff. First, as a general rule, both fiscal committees treat as a two-year bill any bill that the committee did not hear, either at the author's decision or at the committee's decision, as well as any bill that the committee referred to the suspense file but did not either affirmatively pass or hold by any official action. Second, now just like any other standing committee in the legislature, a bill in either the Senate or Assembly Appropriations Committee is not truly dead until the deadline to move the bill has expired, such as the constitutional deadline of January 31st for two-year bills. The third issue is unless the LegInfo website is somehow changed, there is not a bill history action to designate a bill as a two-year bill. For example, a bill may have been re-referred to the Assembly Appropriations Committee but was never heard. The LegInfo website history action will just show the referral and nothing else. On the other hand, a bill that was heard and sent to suspense but was not considered by the committee at the suspense file hearing may have a LegInfo history action as hearing postponed by committee. In the other house, in the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Leg Info history action generally shows held under submission on all the bills that were noticed for a suspense file hearing day, but they didn't move forward. Now, do note, as I mentioned earlier, that the Senate Fiscal Committee does publish a 2-year bill list, so that is helpful for capital observers trying to find out what happened to a bill held on suspense and whether it was distinguished as a 2-year bill.